Maharaj.
Namaskar, namaskar.
We can start now, right, Maharaj? Yes. Pranam Maharaj, and good evening to everyone, and good morning to those joining from India and other parts of Asia and Australia. We are into the 56th session of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. As usual, this will be recorded. Prajwal, who is to moderate this, is on a much needed vacation to India, so I will be moderating it in the beginning for a few weeks. So the recording of this will be available on Vedanta Society's channel immediately. However, the Stanford students link will be updated in a couple of weeks by Prajwal. So the logistics are as usual. Swamiji will give a lecture for an hour and then followed by 30 minutes of Q&A. Please use the button to raise your hand through Zoom to be in the queue. If you're on YouTube, you can come and ask your question via text and somebody will read it for you. So with that, I will hand it over to Swamiji to deliver today's lecture. Thank you.
So thank you. Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidhyakena yopakurotam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranchaliranatosmi stuve patanjalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam kartrusutrasya bhashyasya kramar vivaranasya cha. This is an interesting part of the Yoga Sutra text, what we have been discussing and what we will continue discussing today. These 18th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20, all these sutras. So you find an interesting discussion between two schools of thought. As I mentioned earlier, Vyasa, as the commentator of these Yoga Sutras, was not much into dialectics or polemics, but still here he makes certain points clear. Most probably maybe because when he was writing this commentary, the Vijnanavada school of Buddhism, Buddhist idealism was very prominent. So he had to say a few things with regard to the concept of momentariness, Kshanikavada. So to create the background, especially in today's two sutras, I shall say a few things about this concept of impermanence or momentariness of everything, which is an important doctrine of Buddhism. First of all, we should remember, Buddhists believed that everything that exists emerges from some conditions. So they believe this kind of casual efficiency of existence. Means there is no real purpose. Everything emerges due to some accident. In many ways, this philosophy, according to some scholars, is an extension of what the other school of Indian philosophy, which emerged along with Buddhism, that is Jaina philosophy. In Jainism, there is this concept of accidentalism. Everything happens due to an accident. There is no real background by which you can explain the emergence of anything in this world. So they believed in what we call impermanence. The idea of impermanence was later promoted to a much more profound and deeper concept of the fundamental momentariness of everything in this world. Everything is momentary. It's called Kshanikavada, or sometimes called Kshanabhangavada. Everything comes, exists for one moment and then disappears, then something else emerges. Now, Vyasa, the commentator of yoga system, finds some important problems here. If everything is momentary, mind also is momentary. If mind is momentary, then how can that mind pursue external things? So mind should be only an instrument, a reflecting medium of something that is beyond mind, the Purusha. Because when you talk about change, the idea of change can be understood only in relation to something which is unchanging. If you say this man is tall, then you are implying that there is somebody who is taller or somebody who is shorter. If you say this is black or this is white or this is yellow, this is green, blue, etc., if you use any one word, you are implying that there is something else which is different from that particular color. This is an important thing. So, actually, Vyasa uses this fallacy of Buddhist logic to expound his concept of Purusha. What is Purusha? Purusha is one unchanging seer, perceiver, drashta, subject. Everything else is changing. So, we should keep this in mind when we try to understand these sutras which are coming. Now, another important thing to remember is, according to Buddhists, life itself is an unbroken stream of successive states. An unbroken, continuous stream of successive states. Each state is momentary. So you find in one of the sutras, Vyasa, of course we will find that mind cannot perceive itself and it cannot perceive something else simultaneously. Because when mind emerges, the object that mind is trying to pursue is not there. And when the later object emerges, this mind is not there, this mind is gone, because mind itself is momentary. Chittam itself is momentary, one after another. It comes and goes. So, every human state, physical and also psychological state, is one spot, one state. Means the entire life is nothing but an unbroken, successive stream of states. And this stream moves backward and forward. So, if you look at something from his, let us say, from his movement backward, it is called past. When you look at it from in his forward dimension, it is called future. So you can pratitya samutpada, this 12 link, you can find in Buddhism, this 12 link, pratitya samutpada, 12 link chain, which can be divided into past, present and future. And Trishna is, or desire is the root cause of everything. Because of the desire, our desire, we cling to life, we cling to everything, and as a result of this body-mind complex emerges, and this successive stream of unbroken flow of consciousness continues, a stage continues till we get nirvana. And nirvana is attained through the practice of Ashtanga Yoga. That means the right conduct, the right livelihood, the right speech, the right concentration, the right memory, and so on. So instead of an Atman, a self or a soul, the Buddhist interprets the entire existence as a continuous, successive stage moving in a stream. This is an important point to be kept in mind when we enter these sutras. So now we come to this sutra, which I think we have to discuss this 19th sutra. We did not complete 19th sutra. 19th sutra is Tat swabhasam na tat swabhasam drishyatvad. Na tat swabhasam. That's the first part. That chittam, that mind is not capable of self-revelation. It is not self-evident. It is not self-revealing. The reason is given drishyatva. Drishya means an object that is seen because it is an object. And then Vyasa said, Vyasa finds fault with one important statement that must have taken from Buddhist scriptures. Agnivat. Agni means. So, Purusha cannot be compared to Agni, because Agni or fire or light or any of these things are perceived by Chittam, and Purusha cannot be something that is perceived by something else. Purusha is the ultimate perceiver or seer. So we discussed that point. Next point we have to discuss today. If you have got any doubt, you are most welcome during interaction, because there is a little bit of dialectics and polemics involved here, but it is an intellectual pastime which we can enjoy. So, nacha sarupa matre asti samyogaha. The point is, the previous statement is that nahi agni atmasarupam prakasham prakashedi prakashaschayam prakasha samyogi drishtaha. So, how do we see certain things? If we see certain things, it's because something which is revealing and what is revealed join together, samyoga. Prakashya means what is revealed. Prakashaka means what is revealing. Chittam is prakashaka when it comes to fire, because mind perceives the fire. Fire means Agni. And fire is perceived, the object. And mind is perceiver. They come together, so we come to know of the reality of fire in front of us. Nacha surupa matra asti samyogaha. But surupa matra means, well, aham bodha. I am here, or I exist, I am. For that, we don't need something else. To know that there is fire here, we need somebody who reveals it. We have to see with our eyes and with our mind coming together, we perceive it. At the same time, well, I, the Atman, I, the Purusha, that is self-evident, self-revealed. You don't have to, you don't need somebody else to tell you that you are there, I'm here, I exist. So this is aham bodha. For that, you don't need anything else, because that aham, that I, that is Purusha. Purusha is self-evident. Purusha is not a drishya. Purusha is not something that is revealed. Purusha is the ultimate revealer. Purusha is the ultimate seer, the ultimate perceiver. So, at the highest level, when you reach that spiritual experience according to Yoga and Sankhya system, and also in Vedantic system, I mean, when you say Aham Brahmasmi, when you feel, well, I exist, that Aham, that is Surupa Matra. Surupa means Susyarupa, means one's own true nature. When you become aware of your own existence, for that you don't require somebody else to mention that. It is self-evident. Kimcha swabhasam chittamiti agrahyameva kasyachit iti sabdarthaka. Now, suppose somebody tells you that this mind itself is self-evident, And that is the view of, you have to remember that's a view of Buddhists, because according to Vijnanavada, according to this called the Yogacara system, Chittam alone is the only reality. They deny the entire empirical existence. So long as they are concerned, an external object exists only so long as the mind is aware of it. And that awareness is only for a split second. So anyway, these are, when you discuss this matter, if things are not clear, you can ask this question. Kimcha swabhasam chittamiti means, if people argue that chittam or mind itself is self-evident or self-effulgent instead of Atman, instead of Purusha, then iti agrahyameva kasyachit iti sabdarthaka. Then nothing can really be seen, because that mind immediately changes. It disappears, another mind comes. Tad yatha swapna pradishtam akasam na para pradishtam ityarthaka. It's just like saying the sky is established in itself. Sky is seen by mind, and that sky is, it is not self-evident like Atman. It is seen by mind and eyes, therefore it exists only as an object. After this, the next sutra begins. Next sutra is, this discussion continues. Eka samaye cha ubhaya anavadharanam. This is also very interesting. It may be more simple. The sutra tells you that you cannot know yourself and other objects at the same time. That's what it says. Why? Because this again is a reference to Yogacara system. According to Yogacara system, knowledge is the result of mind and objects. That's the result. But according to Yoga system, Yogacara and Yoga system, two different things. Please remember, Yogacara system is the name of a school of idealism in Buddhist philosophy. It is also called Vijnanavada. Vijnanam here means mind. So Vijnanam in Yogacara Buddhist context doesn't mean Atman or knowledge. It means Chittam. It can also mean knowledge in certain context, but it is Chittam. I shall try to create this background maybe more clearly. According to Vijnanavada school, our mind is a platform. All external objects come in successive waves. So long as this platform, our mind, which is a platform, reflects, is or aware of external object, it has an existence. Otherwise not. If I see the bridge in front of me, when I am aware of the existence of the bridge has an ontological reality. If I am not aware of it, it has no ontological reality. This is the essence of Buddhist Vijnanavada system. They deny the reality of empirical world, the reality of external objects. We should remember that in total contrast to this, there are two schools of realism in Buddhist tradition. It is called Vaisheshika and Sautrantika view. Sautrantikas and Vaibhashika. Remember, Vaisheshika is a orthodox system of Indian philosophy, but Vaibhashika is a school of realism in Buddhism. We should not confuse between this. Vaibhashika and Sautrantika are two schools of realism belonging to Hinayana tradition in Buddhism. Vaisheshika, Nyaya and Vaisheshika are two schools of Hindu orthodox philosophical systems. Vaisheshika is called atomism, and Nayayikas are called Indian school of logic, two different things. So according to Vaibhashika and Sautrantika systems, of Buddhist realism, it's called Hinayana system. External objects do have a reality tentatively. But according to Yogacara or Vijnanavada school, external objects do not have any existence apart from its awareness in our mind. Our mind is like a platform on which all these external objects emerge and exist for one kshana. Kshana means one moment, and they disappear. This school of momentariness is the foundation of Buddhism. We should always remember that. In fact, how does mindfulness help us mentally? Simple logic is there. Suppose you can look at everything that happens to you, external world and also in your mind, as something momentary, something impermanent. Actually, it gives you a lot of relief. And if you can always think of the momentariness of job insecurity, loss of money, or loss of near and dear ones, some tragedies, all this, if we can think, oh, this is something impermanent. It is not the impermanence as understood in Vedanta school. In Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta also they use the word impermanent, where it means relative entity. Vedanta doesn't deny completely the reality of external objects. But Vedanta tells you that they do not have absolute reality. They are only relative. It is called Vyavaharika, it is called Mithya, it is called the doctrine of Mithyatum, doctrine of Maya, doctrine of Vyavaharika. But in Yogacara system, which is kind of subjective idealism, as I mentioned earlier, everything in this world is momentary. So if you can actually keep in mind that all you are experiencing is impermanent, essentially impermanent, then actually you can feel a lot of peace of mind. And you can actually watch the whole thing as a continuing flow, a stream of momentary, impermanent sensations. And that actually gives you a sense of detachment. And that gives you peace of mind. That's actually the psychological principle behind mindfulness meditation and the great relaxation that you get out of it. It's a great help for people. Anyway, there's a different subject now. So coming back to the subject, here this sutra, the 20th sutra tells you, Eka samayecha ubhaya anavadharanam. Anavadharanam means non-perception or non-cognition. Eka samaye means at the same time. So, anavadharana means non-perception. In other words, it is impossible for you to pursue something together. That means both the mind and its objects cannot be perceived or cognized simultaneously at the same time. We cannot cognize our mind and also the objects which the mind is cognizing at the same time. That is an important, it's a fact. When you are actually focusing your attention on an external object, actually your mind takes the form of the external objects. And then when you close your eyes, you can actually cognize your mind. So both cannot happen at the same time. So yoga philosophers will tell you that because you are able to cognize your own mind, there should be somebody who is other than the mind, who is the ultimate cognizer of your own mind, and that cognizer is Purusha. Mind is changing. Now happy, another time unhappy. Mind doesn't remain all the time. Mind is changing all the time. But there should be somebody or something behind all this, and that is Purusha, which is unchanging, which is the ultimate seer or perceiver or cognizer. So that is the essence of this sutra. Now coming to Bharasya. Eka samayecha ubhaya anavadharanam. You should keep in mind that that according to Yogacara system, knowledge is possible without a Purusha, without an unchanging reality. Knowledge is possible even without an unchanging reality according to Buddhist schools of Vijnanavadins. They will tell you that mind, chittam and object coming together can create cognition. At the same time, they will tell you this mind is changing all the time. That creates actually a kind of ad infinitum, which we are going to discuss in the coming sutras. Actually, Vyasa refers to that. Bharasya comes. Nacha ekasmin kshane sarupa avadharanam swa pararupa avadharanam yuktam. Swa avadharanam and para rupa avadharanam. At the same split second, we cannot really be aware of our mind and also the object that it is perceiving. I mean, simultaneous cognitions of one's own mind and the form of another object is not possible. Kshinigavadino yad bhavanam saiva kriya tadeva chakaragamiti abhibhagamaha. It's an important statement. There is a reference to Kshinigavadina. Kshinigavadina is a reference to all the four schools of Buddhism. Sautrantikas, Vaibhashikas, Vijnanavadins and Shunyavadins. All of them accept Kshinigavada. Means the doctrine of momentariness. But the only difference, Vaibhashikas and Sautrantikas, they tentatively accept the reality of external objects, and Shunyavadins and Vijnanavadins, that is the Yogacara system, they totally reject the reality of external objects, even tentatively. So here Vyasa says, Kshinigavadinaha yad bhavanam. Bhavanam actually means existence, coming into existence of something. Saiva kriya tadeva cha karagamidi abhibhagamaha. What it means, it should be a bit complicated. Let us say, just let us accept for argument's sake. Let us accept the Buddhist view for argument's sake. You should remember, I mentioned this earlier, that this is not a refutation of Buddha's teachings of the Four Noble Truths or anything. This is only a refutation of some of the thoughts that emerged in Buddhist philosophy almost 500 years after Buddha. This is an important thing. And those who are not familiar with the evolution of Indian philosophy will terribly think, oh, we are all rejecting Buddha. Not at all. Absolutely wrong. It's not rejection of Buddhism. It is only a discussion of a logical fallacy in one of the fringe schools of Buddhism. So, Kshinigavadinaha yad bhavanam saiva kriya. Kriya means action. So, the emergence of chittam, mind, and the act of that mind perceiving an object, that is kriya. So, these are two things happening. First, you should remember, in Buddhist tradition, there are minds emerging every kshana, every moment. Every moment a thought emerges, a chittam, a mind emerges. And the mind first emerges, and after that, the object that the mind is witnessing, cognizing, perceiving emerges. But these two things happen at two different moments, kshana. So when the mind emerges, immediately disappears, another mind comes. So the first mind will not be able to recognize or understand an object in front of it. Because first they should come together, and nothing can emerge together. Every kshana gives birth to one mind. After mind emerges, it disappears, that very kshana it disappears, then something else, an object comes, he perceives it. They don't exist at the same time. So, actually, Vyasa is trying to drive home the idea, this chittam, as Vijnanavadins argue, cannot be the ultimate perceiver. Why? Because this chittam is coming, disappearing, again another chittam comes, another it disappears, and again it comes. It's a continuous flux, a stream of sensations, mental emotions and feelings, cognitions. This is the Buddhist philosophy. Why all these ideas put together here? Only to make us understand the fact that without a Purusha which is unchanging, perception is not possible. Because mind is always changing, emerging, existing for one split second, disappearing, again giving birth to another mind. So also objects, so how can such a mind be a perceiver of anything? That's the idea behind. The object emerges after the first mind is gone. Though every time a mind is trying to perceive, that mind is gone already. But the object comes later. So unless you understand the Kshanikavada in its correct form, you should remember, every kshana is actually a small unit of a split second, according to the ancient Indian calculation. It is enough to drive anyone crazy. How can so many minds emerge and so many objects? So that's what actually Vyasa is trying to show eventually, that you cannot think of anything, any kind of perception, unless you think of one aparinami Purusha, one Purusha which is unchanging, which is permanent, which is self-evident. Vyasa is slowly trying to build up his thesis that Purusha is the only unchanging, ultimate seer and perceiver. Mind is only one of the evolutes of ahankara. As I mentioned earlier, human mind, according to yoga system, is one of the evolutes, is a matter. Human mind, according to yoga system, is something material, matter. But according to yoga system, when the Purusha's reflection is connected to the mind, then mind becomes endowed with the ability for cognition. But that faculty comes only from Purusha, it is not its own faculty. That's why Kshanikavadino yad bhavanam, means when mind emerges, saiva kriya tadeva cha karagamiti abhivagamaha. It will be logic, it will follow that the cognition of both the agent of knower, agent or the knower of action cannot come together. Therefore, this idea is not accepted. Purusha is only unchanging reality. So, Purusha alone can be the self-knowing entity. Chittam is only an object that is perceived and cognized by Purusha. Mind is changing, but Purusha is unchanging all the time. So, these are the ideas. Now, we will come to the 21st Sutra. The discussion continues. Here, Bhashyam, the Bhashya says, one may argue, another argument is put forward, one may argue. Mind which gets existence by its own nature. But the idea is, Buddhists argue, they put forward another argument. The argument is simple. It is actually based on this the 20th Sutra. Chittandradrisye buddhi buddhe dati prasangaha smriti sankarascha. Suppose somebody says that each chittam emerges and it becomes an object, and that object is perceived by another chittam, then that second chittam, second mind also will need another knower. Like that, there will be a continuous flow of emerging minds. So, what is the ultimate knower? That will create a kind of mixed memories in mind. So that's the meaning. Chittandra drishye buddhi buddhe radhi prasanga smriti sankarascha. If the mind is to be illumined by another mind, chittandra drishya means if one mind is perceived or illumined by another mind, then there will be repetition, so many minds, and that leads to ad infinitum. I mean, it's called infinite regress, equal anavastha dosha. And then there will be intermixture of memories. What it says is, if one mind comes and it disappears, another mind comes, it disappears. So all these minds perceive and they remember various things seen, heard or experienced. Then if you want to remember something, it will be impossible. You have to remember, Vyasa is driving home his theory that mind cannot be the ultimate perceiver, as argued by one school of Buddhist philosophy called Yogacara system or Vijnanavada. This is the essence. This should be always kept in mind. Vyasa is trying to enforce his idea that behind the mind there is one ultimate perceiver, and that ultimate perceiver is Purusha, and that Purusha is unchanging. Swami Vivekananda, in some of his writings, he tries to give tries to make this point clear by giving example from the movement of trains. Suppose so many trains are moving at various speeds. Now, a train that is moving faster, its momentum, its movement can be perceived by somebody who is sitting in a train which is moving slower. And another person sitting in another train which is moving even much slower can perceive the movement of the second train. But ultimately, the whole question of movement of trains, suppose there is one train which is moving very, very slowly, maybe 1-2 kilometer speed, 2 mile speed, that movement can be perceived only by somebody who is sitting in a train which is not moving at all. This example will make it clear. So now, unless you come down ultimately to something which is unchanging, which is not moving, you cannot actually think of movement as a possibility. So, mind is always changing, buddhi is always changing, objects are always changing according to momentariness, the doctrine of momentariness. So how can this mind which is always changing be a perceiver, the cognizer of objects which are also changing? So the ultimate cognizer is like the person who is sitting, maybe standing on a platform. He is looking at so many trains moving at various speeds. He can perceive even the movement of a train which is moving maybe at 5 miles or 2 miles per hour speed. This is an important thing. For that, he should be standing there without any movement. If he is moving, then he won't be able to perceive the movement of a train which is moving very slowly. Eventually, there should be behind all of us, there should be one ultimate, unchanging, permanent reality. Without positing, without thinking, conceiving of a permanent, unchanging, absolute reality, we cannot think of anything in this world, we cannot think of cognition. Another point is, this ultimate cognizer, he should be self-effulgent, self-revealing, like Atman. It goes so prakashaka, or swabhasam, the word was used here. Everything else in this world gets its light from other lights. I mentioned this earlier when I discussed at the beginning of this session, the Jyoti Brahmanam that comes in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, where Janaka asked this question to Yajnavalkya. How do we see things during daytime? Sunlight. And when sun has already set in the west, moonlight. Suppose there is no sunlight, no moonlight, then we may perhaps strike a matchstick fire. But suppose these things don't exist, then how do we come to know of things moving, happening around us? By hearing. Suppose all these are gone, you are sitting somewhere, no moonlight, there no Chandra Jyoti, no Surya Jyoti, no Vak Jyoti, no Agnir Jyoti, no light of sun or moon, or fire or word. You are sitting somewhere, you can't hear even, let us say, no Vak Jyoti. Speech also doesn't function as a Jyoti, as a light. Still you sit there, you meditate, you think. In your mind you recollect what you did previous day, this morning, and so on. Something is happening. Perception is happening. Cognition is happening through memory. How does it happen? There is somebody within you who doesn't require the light of the sun or the light of the moon or the light of matchstick or even the sound. Like that, behind the cognition of mind and intellect, there should be somebody who's unchanging. Mind and intellect, they are used simultaneously with the same meaning here. Chittam can mean mind, intellect, knowledge, and so on. Awareness, all these are ideas are included in this particular context, the main chittam. So behind the mind, behind the intellect, behind everything, there is one aparinami purusha. That sutra we already discussed earlier. That sutra should be, this is a very one important sutra. That is sada jnataha chittavrteha tat prabhoho purushasya aparinamitva, the 17th sutra. This sutra actually establishes the reality of one Purusha who is unchanging, who is self-evident, who is self-effulgent, who doesn't require somebody else to reveal it, who is not an object, who is always a seer, the subject. And all other faculties are able to function, are able to cognize things because the Purusha lends its effulgence to these faculties. Just like the sunlight and moonlight and the fire and speech, all of them get their ability to reveal things only because there is Atman residing in all of us. When this Atman withdraws itself from this body-mind complex, a person who is dead, that person, there may be sunlight everywhere, spread everywhere, the moonlight, there could be candlestick, but he cannot see anything with the help of sunlight or moonlight. Why? Because the Atma Jyoti has disappeared from that body-mind complex. It has withdrawn. It doesn't disappear, it has withdrawn from that particular body-mind complex. Just like electricity has withdrawn from one particular gadget, that gadget becomes non-functional. So, the ultimate purpose of Vyasa in his commentaries is simple. He wants to establish one fact. Maybe during his time, this Vyasa is not the author of Puranas or Brahma Sutras. This Vyasa must be one of the teachers who came in the lineage of Patanjali system. So he wants to drive home one idea. The idea that is this simple. That is, mind is not the ultimate cognizer. The reason is, mind is always changing. Mind is parinami, changing. It's happy now, unhappy later. But this mind itself is perceived by somebody other than the mind, transcending the mind. And that somebody is Purusha. And that Purusha doesn't require anyone's help to reveal itself. It is self-revealing. So the example is given here. For example, in the Bharasya, it said, we discussed this earlier. Nacha swarupamatre asti samyogaha. When you say, well, I am here, I am, means I exist. For that, you don't require somebody else to tell you, yes, you exist. It is self-awareness. In this self-awareness, there is no need of a mind and some object to come together. It is Surupamatra. It is one's own self-awareness. And that self-awareness comes from Purusha. Purusha in the yoga context, Swami Vivekananda and modern commentators have linked this Purusha to Atman concept of Vedanta. As I mentioned earlier, at the level of conclusion, the concept of Purusha in yoga system makes real sense only when you link it to the concept of Atman of Vedanta. That's why. And then he continues, Kimcha swabhasam chittamidi agrahimeva kasyajititi shabdarthaka. Suppose somebody says, Chittam, mind itself, as its own faculty, its own ability to aware of it. Vyasa says it is not possible. Kruddhokam, bhidokam, amutrame ragaha, amutrame krodha iti. These are examples. I am angry now. I am afraid now. I am scared. Or I like this, or I don't like this. I dislike this. All these. Here, actually, these are states of human mind. These show the fluctuations, the changeability of human mind. I am kruddhoham, now I am angry. Then bhidoham, now I am scared. All these are different states of human mind. Vyasa is mentioning all this. What does it mean? Behind this mind, which is happy now, unhappy later, scared now, and happy later, behind this mind, there should be somebody who is perceiving, who is cognizing this mind, and who is aware of these different states of human mind. And that should be Purusha. That Purusha never gets angry, happy or unhappy. It always remains unattached, unaffected. That Purusha is aparinami. So that is the important sutra we should always remember. Sada jnataha chitta vritteha tat prabhoga purushasya aparinamitvad. This Purusha is the overlord of mind, chitta. Chittasya prabhu, it means tat prabhoga. And because of this Purusha's presence, mind is able to cognize different objects, and everything is known to this Purusha. And this Purusha is the only ultimate cognizer or knower. So this is the natural conclusion of this particular section. Of course, the sutra continues. Then in the 21st sutra, Vyasa gives some problems. Again, so I know it's could be slightly boring, the dialectical. Again, just like in the old traditional Bharasya context you find. Suppose you accept all this, and again tomorrow you return again with another argument. This is how I am going to refute you. Shankaracharya's style, more or less Buddha, Vyasa's style, So this maybe in those days they have nothing else to do. Maybe these were glorious times when Socrates was sitting in ancient Greece with all Plato and Xenoph and all gathering to the glorious times of Western civilization. Like that, you can find here Vyasa coming again and again. Suppose again you come forward with another argument, here take it. This is my reply to this. Of course, Shankaracharya goes far beyond all this. So anyway, then that's why he says, in the beginning of the commentary on 21st Sutra, you need little sense of humor to understand the old man catching hold of somebody with and then driving home his idea in a most uncompromising language. But there is a charm and beauty and grandeur and sublimity about the culture and civilization which produces great thinkers. They were not fighting and quarreling. They were talking about human mind, cognition, Atman, self, all these great ideas. I can give an example. See how Vyasa introduces the 21st Sutra. Bharasya. Syan matihi. Swarasa niruddham chittam chittandarena samanandrena grihyade iti. One may argue. Tomorrow morning you may come and argue again. Well, you may argue that if the mind is illumined by another mind, then you understand this problem is there. What's the problem? Problem is, he says, buddhi buddhehi adiprasangaka. Then that mind which is cognized by another mind, and that each of this mind requires somebody else to cognize it. There will be ad infinitum. It is called ad infinitum is, it is called infinite regress. Continuing, just like suppose two persons arguing who came first, the seed or the tree. Without a seed, there cannot be tree. Without tree, there cannot be seed. From seed, tree comes. And from tree only you get the seed. Like that continues. So this kind of argument has no end. So Vyasa says, if the Jnanavadis argue that one mind is perceived by another mind and it is perceived by another mind, then that kind of argument will lead to ad infinitum, anavastha dosha. So there will be no end to that kind of argument, which is considered to be a fallacy in dialectical tradition. That's right. So now we can have interaction. Those of you who have got doubts, you are most welcome. I shall try to explain this.
Thank you, Swamiji. Sanjay asked me to moderate in his absence, and
you can moderate. Sanjay introduces. Actually, when Prajwal he left for India, he is the representative of the Stanford Student Association. So you should moderate. Sanjay will introduce at the beginning, but you should take up this moderation.
Yes,
please.
He messaged me that I should do that. Thank you, Maharaj.
Please.
The first hand up was Sri Ram. There was a question on YouTube, and then Kathleen had the second hand up. So Sri Ram, can you unmute?
Yeah. Okay. David also doubt.
I see you, David, as well.
Yeah.
Sri Ram, are you there? Are you ready to?
I'm here. Yes.
Very good.
I can unmute my video as well.
Yeah.
Swamiji, you mentioned some time back that, so in today's discussion, you mentioned that the Nitya aspect in Vedanta is the Atman and in Sankhya is the Purusha. So although you said earlier that in Vedanta or Advaita Vedanta, we maintain that the net of yoga, even if we attain the highest goal, is only Chitta Shuddhi, is more a fine point on who that Koham, who that Purusha is.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
So by that argument, other than Jnana Yoga, where we apply the Nitya Vastu Viveka and identify who the Koham is, by the Jnana Yoga viewpoint, even the attainer of the highest goal in Karma Yoga or Bhakti Yoga would be less than that attained by Jnana Yoga. And secondly, this fundamental injunction of this lack of an underlying Nitya reality that you said, Vyasa brought up about Buddhism, which seems so apparent now. What was the answer in the Buddhist philosophy to that? What is their underlying reality?
Yeah, actually, there is so far as modern scholarship goes, there's no real answer from Buddhists, because Vyasa is very sparingly he indulged in dialectics in his commentary. You can find only in few sutras, that too in the 12th, 4th chapter. Only when there is one sutra which somehow connects itself with the Yogacara system of philosophy dealing with mind or chittam, and chittam is an important subject for Vijnanavad in schools. For them, chittam is the ultimate ultimate reality, and chittam comes and goes every kshana, every split second it comes and goes. So in that context only, Vyasa wants to drive home the idea that chittam cannot be the ultimate knower. To drive home that idea, he indulges in this dialectics. Vijnanavadins, they were busy mostly fighting and refuting the views of Sautrantikas and Vaibhashikas. So most of the dialectical books that Buddhists wrote up to 6th century, 5th century, 6th century, they were all mostly replies given to the Buddhist philosophers belonging to Sautrantikas and Vaibhashika schools, the realists. So this is an important thing to remember. So second question you mentioned about Nitya and Nitya means the real or the unchanging, the eternal, the immortal, and so on. So according to Buddhist schools, there is no such thing as permanent. Everything in this world, human life itself is a continuous flow of impermanent, momentary states moving one after another. For them, and the only difference is, among them, Sautrantikas and Vaibhashikas tentatively accept the reality of external things, only tentatively, because they are also momentary. But Vijnanavadins and Shunyavadins don't even tentatively accept the existence of external world. That's why they're called idealists.
But this would be contradictory to our intuition that even all through time, in different periods of life, there is something permanent that we experience in deep sleep. That contradictory to that.
Yeah, the point is, from yoga or Sankhya system, yoga philosophers got their metaphysics from Sankhya system, so more or less identical. From yoga Sankhya system to Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, I would like to try to connect these two. In yoga Sankhya system, there are two permanent eternal realities, permanent eternal categories, Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is self-effulgent. It is our true identity, and Prakriti is Jada. It is the source of our evolution. We have to get out of this bondage by dehypnotizing ourselves, so to speak, by disconnecting ourselves with Prakriti and by reclaiming our identity with Purusha. But that's again is a system of dualism. More than one reality, Sankhya Yoga system. In Advaita Vedanta, the same Purusha is elevated to something much higher. In Advaita Vedanta, this Purusha is not only self-effulgent, but it is one. It is one ultimate, eternal, divine principle. It manifests as this external world, but it doesn't undergo any change. It appears to have become this external world. There is no real change called Vivarta. And that is the only ultimate reality. Everything else, including this external world, is only relative. And that Purusha, which is eternal, which is one, which is omniscient, is called not Purusha but Atma or Brahman in Vedanta. So that's why modern mystical writers on yoga, there's a difference between scholars like the modern times, the Bhaswati was written by Hariharananda Aranya in 19th century. Then S.N. Dasgupta wrote on this subject, and many others have written books on Yoga Sutras. Now, their writings are mostly attempt to do justice to yoga as a text. But Swami Vivekananda approached yoga text from a higher spiritual, mystical perspective. So he accepts all the higher aspects of yoga, but he points out, and surprisingly, he connects the ultimate concept, ultimate reality of yoga to Atman. So you often find he uses the same language which he used for explaining Atman. He uses while trying to explain Purusha in his system. So that's an important thing to remember. That may not be fully accepted by the traditional commentators of yoga system. But another thing I want to tell you, many of the commentators of yoga system were Buddhists and many were Advaitins actually. That's also an important thing. Yoga and Sankhya system never had its own congregation, its own denomination. Vedantins have their own denominations. But Sankhya and Yoga system did not have any denominations. You don't find people following Sankhya system, but you can find people following Vaishnava tradition, Ramanuja tradition, Madhva tradition, Shankara tradition, so on. But you don't find people following Sankhya and Yoga system. They are mostly intellectual disciplines. It's an important thing to remember. So even those who followed that, Shankara wrote Vivarana based on Vyasa's commentary. Shankaracharya wrote Vivarana commentary on the same yoga system. But he was an Advaitin. So you can see. So for them, it's just like suppose you are a physics professor and you think physics is the most important subject that worth studying or teaching. You may also write a textbook on chemistry for primary school students. Nothing wrong in it because you have studied chemistry enough to write on. Maybe you know as much chemistry as physics. Something like that. It's an important thing to remember. Spiritually, yoga and Sankhya system do make a lot of sense, but only when they are connected to Advaita Vedanta. Otherwise, how do you say Purusha? What is the Purusha? Self-effulgent but inactive. What is Prakriti? A kind of a concept of the origin of evolution. But the moment you understand the slow evolution of intelligence, and the concept of different senses of mind and intellect and so on, then you understand there is a lot of psychology. And psychology can never be detached from spirituality. Because you enter spirituality only through psychology. Psychology takes you, proper approach to psychology can take you to higher levels of spirituality. Of course, you leave psychology far behind when you go to higher levels of spirituality. But we begin with our mind. This mind has to be purified. This mind has to be made pure. And when you reach that stage, it's called Chitta Shuddhi, as you asked this question, Chitta Shuddhi. Chitta Shuddhi, when mind is ready for higher understanding, that state is called Chitta Shuddhi. That's the idea behind. Okay, please next question. David, please. Yeah.
Was I next or that?
Next question came up on YouTube, and then Kathleen, and then David. Thanks for your patience. The YouTube question came up during the class around the time that you were discussing the 20th Sutra.
Yeah.
And it sought clarification on the terms of mind and thought. And I'll read the exact language of the question. So basically, mind emerges means that thought emerges, or is that one and the same thing? And mind is a vehicle of the soul. So you see there, the question is mind emerging and thought emerging the same meaning? Is mind and thought the same thing?
Yeah. Actually, this is in this 20th Sutra, Chittantra Drishye Buddhi Buddhi Radiprasanga Smriti Sankarascha. What it means is, this again anticipating a counter argument from Vijnanavadi, anticipating a counter argument from Vijnanavadi as an answer to Vyasa's views. Suppose you argue that for perceiving or cognizing one mind, you can think you can bring in another mind, then there will be no end to that. Not only that, each of these emerging minds will have its own memories, its own experiences. So you won't be able to recollect anything because there will be mixing up of mental sensations. I think the question you mentioned was something related to the next one. Okay, that is of course there is a difference in numbering in the book which I have got, Chittantra Drishye Buddhi Buddhi Rati Prasanga Smriti Sankarascha. What it means is, the same thing I said. The same thing. Same thing I said. I think it's the same. The difference in numbering, because some of the texts take one sutra, the last sentence of Vyasa's commentary, and make it an independent sutra. So altogether 196 sutras. But that is only one according to one school of yoga thinkers, not all. Okay, please continue. Yeah.
Yes, understood. Kathleen, would you unmute, please, and ask your question?
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Yeah.
I was wondering, I'm thinking of an overview of this, and my sense is that this yoga, the Raja Yoga, is the main thrust of it is that the more we quiet our mind, the closer we will come to the truth. And of course, then we have to understand what the mind is and how emotions are connected and how we're attached more than we really think we are. Once we understand that, then the quieting of the mind is a question of going inside and not being so impulsive and attached to the outside, even though the outside is there. So the more we quiet our mind, and it occurred to me while you were speaking tonight, the more we quiet our mind and the thinking and reasoning and emotions quiet, then the Purusha is self-revealing. It reveals itself almost in a physics way. The more quiet the mind, the more self-revealing will be Purusha. Would that be a correct understanding?
That's correct understanding. In fact, to emphasize that point, that's why Vyasa is actually trying to tell this school of subjective idealists, that your idea that this mind itself, as it is always changing, always full of vritti, samskaras and so on, not very quiet. That mind in that condition is the ultimate cognizer. That view is not acceptable. That's why Vyasa tells them that. So going beyond mind is the purpose of yoga. So yoga chitta vritti nirodhaka. Actually, when vrittis are gone, when you can cleanse your mind of all vrittis, then that chitta loses its essential characteristic of being happy and so on. That chitta, it transcends itself. This is a reality. So chitta can be called chitta according to yoga system also only when it's subjected to this analysis, Kshittam, Mudham, Vikshittam, Ekagram, Niruddham, the 5 stages of human mind, an analysis based on the congregation, the structure of the vrittis. When mind is confused and dull, kshipta and mudha, and vikshipta is when it is now quiet, after some time turbulent, again becoming quiet, again disturbed. That state of mind, highly disturbed, vikshipta, third state. Fourth state is ekagra, when you are able to concentrate on something with calm and quiet and tranquil. And eventually niruddha, when yoga, chitta vritti, nirodha, you transcend beyond, you transcend and by going beyond all vrittis. All vrittis are completely gone, they disappeared. So that state, it is not the mind that we began with. That mind, the old mind is gone. Niruddha state is called, actually it is the asamprajnata samadhi is called. We already mentioned earlier that portion we already discussed much earlier. So at that state, it is not the mind that we normally understand that you're talking about. That mind is actually has become one with Purusha. That's the idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Swami?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Please.
So I have a question that's related to what the last one you had mentioned in your talk, that mindfulness, by noticing the transitory nature of thoughts and everything, one finds some calmness. But I thought, so from what you just spoke about, it seems that the joy or calmness of mind through mindfulness comes because as we practice mindfulness, we get closer, the mind gets nearer to Purusha, and that brings the calmness of mind or the joy of mindfulness. So I'm wondering, how did the Buddhists explain that without the concept of Atman or Purusha? Because in the Jnana Marga, that mindfulness brings one closer to Purusha, which brings joy. But how did the Buddhists explain if they don't posit Purusha?
Yeah. Of course, remember Buddhists are very strong in refutation of anything permanent, like Atman or Purusha or self. They're very strong in their denial of anything permanent. It's very anattavada. The doctrine of non-Atman. Now the point is, of course, there are some thinkers who ask this question: when you attain nirvana, you feel the blessedness. But who is the one who attains nirvana? And it is not the body, not the panchaskandhas, 5 skandhas, not the body-mind complex. So, who is actually experiencing the blessedness of nirvana? There should be somebody. In the Shunyavada system, they accept Shunya as an ultimate category and the empirical world as Samvriddhi. So Samvriddhi Satyam, Paramartha Satyam. But Nagarjuna's Madhyamika Karika, I say, he says he says that there are two entities. One is the empirical world, Samvriddhi Satyam, like Vyavaharika or the relative of Vedantins, and the Paramarthika Satta, that is Shunya. So Shunya, according to them, is a state which cannot be defined, which can only be experienced, which is non-dual, which is ultimate. So who is experiencing that? So at one point, Buddhists have no real answer to that. There are long discussions in Shankaracharya's commentaries. Coming to the subject mindfulness, I want to say that, it is possible for you to focus on the fundamental momentariness of everything. And when you actually focus on the momentariness of everything, eventually you start focusing on something which is not momentary, really speaking. It's an important thing, because when you focus, keep in mind everything in this world, even in everyday life. Today I was giving a talk on this, Advaita Vedanta. Suppose you think, well, all these are changing. All they were changing. These are impermanent. Everything comes and goes. But now the point is, the very idea of all these things coming and going, appearing, existing only for one moment and then disappearing. If you focus on that momentary nature of the world around you, eventually you will start focusing on something which is the permanent, the non-momentary, the eternal. I think that's what actually gives a person a feeling of calmness and quietude.
Isn't that the Vedanta perspective, like the screen behind the Vedanta perspective is but the Buddhists, they don't posit that, so how can they have any calmness?
So the only answer I can give, Buddha did not, in his dialogues, in conversations, Buddha perhaps did not emphatically deny, but he became silent. Any discussions on God or something transcendental, he was silent. So that's what Buddha's approach. He, of course, obviously he did not accept a created God, anthropomorphic God idea. No, he did not accept. But at the same time, Buddha did not emphatically deny. He was not an atheist. In none of his dialogues we ever come across, don't believe in God, don't believe in anything. You don't find it. You don't find it that. Modern rationalists, he was not negative in anything. Always he turned his disciples' conversation to something positive. So that's what you find. So, of course, later on, Buddhist philosophy, there are almost 18 different philosophical views emerged within Buddhist world, which are all more or less integrated into 4 schools. 2 schools of realism under Hinayana, Sautrantikas and Vaibhashikas, and 2 schools of idealism under Mahayana, the Adivijnanavada and Shunyavada. But there were so many fringe schools which are integrated into one. So, at one point, very difficult to say, one cannot help agreeing with Swami Vivekananda, who said that Buddha also was a Vedanti. He gave an interpretation of the Upanishadic philosophy from a different angle. See, remember, Upanishadic philosophy or Advaita philosophy can be preached and practiced without believing in a religion or God. That's something very interesting. You see, if you just read Sri Ramakrishna's life, Sri Ramakrishna went to Kashi and he met this the Trilinga Swami, was apparently 300 years old man, was living there, but he living in a cave, in a state of super consciousness. But he was not going to temple every day. Kashi is well known for his temple. He was not going to temple every day, because he was experiencing the presence of divine within himself and connecting with that. So there, can we say that he was an atheist? No, never. But he was not going to temple or not practicing any of the ordinary rituals of a traditional religious faith system. So Advaita can be practiced without being a conventional religious person, but you don't have to reject religion, you only transcend it. Without rejecting, you go beyond it. So that is the universal aspect of Vedanta. You don't reject anything, you don't deny anything, never. When you find somebody, no, that is wrong, going to temple is wrong, going to church is wrong, you can know he is not a Vedantin or anything. That's important thing. If he says, well, it is not indispensable for you to be always in temple or go to temple every day. It is not indispensable to go to temple every day. To be spiritual, he is right. But so this is an important thing. Going beyond Transcending is different from rejecting. So Buddha was one who transcended rather than somebody who rejected. That's what seems to be a more rational approach.
So Buddhism is a valid path then, even though
Always, yes. Remember, Buddhism is always relevant and valid. In this particular context, again I want to emphasize this point. Vyasa is pointing out one logical fallacy in one of the arguments of a fringe school of Buddhism, which emerged later, who tried to argue that mind is everything. This changing mind is everything. So that's all. And so if this is a very, I wanted to elaborate this because this is an important part of Kaivalya Pada. Normally you don't find many yoga teachers don't discuss this point. But it's a very important point from a philosophical perspective. That's the idea behind it. Okay.
Swamiji, we've discussed this in previous classes, but there is a comment on the YouTube that one of the students wishes that modern psychiatrists might have a deep comprehension of the Yoga Sutras in order to alleviate suffering in treatment of their patients.
It should be good if they can have, but there are many people who agree with this view. Yoga is very helpful. Yoga is not the name of a religion. You see, here, interestingly, we are talking about human mind, human spiritual evolution, human spiritual aspirations. It is not a faith system as such. So it's really part of the Hindu spiritual heritage, but it itself is not a religious text. Yoga Sutra is not a religious text at all by any.
I find the comment interesting in this context, even though we've considered it before, because you not only discussed mindfulness, but also how even agnosticism is a pathway to integrating in this fashion. So there's no requirement of a theistic worldview. So that suggests that the modern psychiatrist could, in fact, dive deep into Yoga Sutras and benefit their patients.
Yeah, true. That's absolutely true. I fully agree with this friend who raised this subject. Thank you.
Yes. There are no more hands up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.